I need to be fair. I did not think I was choosing his best friend over my husband. 3 things were true, and I held them like they could protect me. My husband had stopped looking at me like I was rare. His best friend still did, and I thought an agreement made everything clean. Of course, I only understood later that people can agree to something and still break inside. By breakfast, the whole campsite had learned what silence could do. My name is Marta Koval. I am 34, and I manage events for small music venues where every door, light, guest list, and late vendor answers to me. I need to be fair. I was good at being the calm woman in the center of noise, and I believed that made me strong. 3 things were true that Thursday night, or at least I treated them like true. My work needed me sharp, my husband needed me easy, and I was tired of being useful instead of wanted. The venue loading dock smelled like rain, beer, and the hot rubber of cables just packed away. I stood with my clipboard while 2 stagehands rolled the last speaker case toward the truck. Lena sat on the edge of the dock in her silver boots, eating fries from a paper cup and telling me I had scared a lighting tech into becoming competent. I smiled because that was the kind of thing people said about me. Hard to impress, hard to move, hard to lose. My husband pulled up 20 minutes late in his grey car. He got out with my spare flats in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. He had remembered the shoes. He had remembered I hated warm water. He had not remembered that this venue opening had taken 6 months of my life, and that I wanted someone to stand there like it mattered. He said he was sorry and told me the bridge inspection had run over. He asked if I was okay, softly, like he was asking a person who might break if the question came too fast. I heard another thing. I heard him asking me to make his absence smaller. I told him I was fine. Of course I did. At home, the camping box sat in the hallway because our group trip was next weekend. On top of the folded tarp was Ethan's small red headlamp. He always packed it first. Before we were married, he used to put paper trail maps in my coat pocket before every trip because I liked paper more than apps. On Sundays, we made pancakes and circled places we could not afford yet. That was real. I do not need to lie about that. While I changed shoes, Ethan asked what had shifted between us since the opening he missed. He said he could tell I came home from rooms before I came home to him. I need to be fair. That was almost a good sentence. But from my husband, it sounded late. I moved the red headlamp off the camping box and set my work bag down in its place. The venue bar after closing always looked uglier with the house lights up. Sticky floor, empty lime wedges, napkins pressed flat under wet glass rings. That night, Caleb stayed after everyone else left, and his voice made the room feel less like a job I had survived. I need to be fair. His best friend was not some stranger who came in and ruined a clean marriage. Caleb had been in Ethan's life since they were boys. He knew the old stories, he knew the camping trips, the group jokes, the way Ethan checked tire pressure before any drive longer than an hour. He knew me as Ethan's wife first. That should have made him safer. 3 things were true while Caleb helped me carry folded signs into the storage room. He made me laugh where people could see it. He asked about my work like the answer could be interesting. And when I said I was tired, he did not tell me to sleep more or drink water or make a list. He said I carried whole rooms on my back and still made it look like a trick. That was not love. I know that. It was one sentence in a messy bar after closing. But my body received it like proof. Priya was near the coat rack, wrapping her scarf twice around her neck. She saw Caleb brush dust from my sleeve. It was nothing, a small touch, almost polite. Still, her hands slowed. Priya hated conflict. She had once apologized to a waiter because another table complained too loudly. So she said nothing. She just looked at me, then at Caleb, and then at the floor. Caleb asked if Ethan was picking me up. I told him Ethan was probably checking some bridge or pipe or wall that would collapse without him. Caleb laughed, but not too hard. That was part of his gift. He knew how to make me feel chosen without making himself look guilty. When Ethan came, he waited by the locked front doors with his phone in his hand. He did not come inside. Caleb left through the side exit, and the cold air followed him out. In the car, Ethan asked why Caleb knew about the stage power issue before he did. He said he had only heard about it from the group chat after Caleb made a joke about me saving the night. It was a specific question, a fair one. My husband's voice stayed even, and that made it worse for me. If he had sounded angry, I could have made him the problem faster. I said Caleb had been there, so of course he knew. Ethan asked why I had not called him. He said he could have come. I need to be fair. I wanted to tell him that coming after being asked was not the same as wanting to be there. But I did not say it that way. I told him he made every feeling into a maintenance issue and that I was not a bridge he could inspect after damage. He held the steering wheel with both hands. The car stayed stopped even after the light turned green, and someone behind us tapped their horn. Ethan drove on. That was the first silence with weight. Later, in our apartment hallway, I took out my phone and saw Caleb had sent me a message about the camping trip. He said I should be in charge of the fire because I could probably scare wet wood into burning. I smiled. Then another message came in, softer, asking if the car ride was bad. I deleted that one before Ethan came out of the bathroom. It was not because I thought I was doing something wrong. Not exactly. 3 things were true and I lined them up like chairs before a show. It was not an affair. Ethan would read it badly. I deserved one small private place where I did not have to explain my face. The next day, Lena came over and sat on our balcony with her knees tucked under her. She had been my college roommate, back when we both thought rent and bad coffee were proof of character. Now she worked in payroll for a dental group and told me her life had become a row of beige folders. She loved my stories because they made her feel near danger without touching it. I told her Caleb understood something Ethan did not. Lena asked if I meant understood me or wanted me. She said it lightly, like we were talking about shoes. I told her not to be cheap. She said some women are born to be wanted loudly, and some men only notice when another man starts clapping. I should have told her to stop. Instead, I laughed. That laugh changed how I heard myself. At the outdoor gear store that Saturday, Ethan checked tent stakes, propane batteries, and the waterproof cover for our cooler. He placed the red headlamp in the basket and asked if my hiking boots still fit. His care moved through objects. It always had. Socks, chargers, maps, tire pressure, protein bars. Before, I called that steady. Now I called it dry. He asked if Caleb had been texting me about the trip. His voice stayed factual, almost careful. He said he had seen Caleb's name light up my screen twice while I was in the shower. I told him everyone was texting about the trip. He asked why I turned the phone over then. That was the named incident, the one small thing he could hold. I said I turned it over because I was tired of being watched in my own home. He stepped back from the cart. He did not defend himself fast enough, and I used that pause. I told him his suspicion was the real problem. Of course, he apologized for making me feel watched. That is what my husband did when he did not know how to fight. He gave ground until there was no flaw under either of us. In the group chat, Caleb posted that Marta would run the campsite like a festival and Ethan would make sure nobody died from poor knot work. People sent laughing faces. Priya sent one small tent emoji and nothing else. Tessa, Ethan's sister, did not react at all. I saw the silence. I chose to read it as boredom. That evening, Lena sent me a message asking if I was excited for the trip or excited for the audience. I answered that both could be true. She sent back a flame emoji. By then, the circle around me had started to shift, but nobody had stepped away loudly enough for me to count it. The campground check-in booth had a faded green roof and a bell that did not work unless you hit it with the side of your hand. The air smelled like lake water, damp leaves, and cold smoke from old fire pits. I arrived with my husband, and Caleb arrived 10 minutes later with firewood balanced against his hip, like he had been expected in the picture. I need to be fair. I did not plan to humiliate Ethan when we unpacked. I planned to enjoy myself. There is a difference, though it gets thinner when people are watching. Three things were true as the group gathered near the lake. Priya kept helping Tessa with folding chairs instead of standing beside me. Rowan had his phone out because he liked filming little weekend clips. Lena stayed close, but she laughed a second late. And his best friend gave me the kind of attention that did not need to be requested. I know that is four things. I counted badly that day. Ethan checked the tent poles and the tarp line. He had a pencil behind his ear and the red headlamp around his wrist, ready before sunset. He looked calm, but his jaw moved once when Caleb offered me his jacket. Caleb did it smoothly. He held it out and said, I looked cold. I was not cold. I took it anyway. My husband saw. He did not say anything there. That was one of his flaws. He saved hurt for private rooms and then wondered why the public version had already grown teeth. By the fire ring, the wet picnic benches left dark lines on the backs of everyone's legs. Someone passed around orange enamel mugs. Caleb told a story about Ethan at 16 tying a canoe badly and pretending it was a design choice. Ethan smiled at first because it was an old story and because he trusted Caleb with old stories. Then I added that some things had not changed. I said Ethan still treated every trip like a safety audit and that Caleb was the only person there who knew how to make camping feel alive. People laughed unevenly. That is the sound I remember. Not a roar, not a clean silence. A few quick laughs, a cough, a chair leg scraping dirt, Tessa saying my name under her breath. Ethan looked at me across the fire. The flames moved over his face and made him hard to read. He asked quietly if we could talk away from everyone for a minute. That was his S3 voice, though I did not call it that then. A quiet debrief. No raised voice, no public correction. He asked for a private door. I heard a trap. I told the group my husband was doing the thing where my fun became his problem. I made my voice light. That was important. Lightness makes cruelty look like charm when the room wants permission to keep smiling. Caleb looked into his mug. Priya stopped moving. Rowan's phone was still low in his hand, pointed not exactly at me, not exactly away. Tessa stared at my face as if she was seeing a person she had warned herself about. Ethan did not argue. He set his mug down on the edge of the fire ring. Then he walked to our tent and fixed a loose stake that had started to pull from the wet ground. That was when the red headlamp changed for me, though I refused to name it. Earlier, it had been a piece of gear on a camping box. Now the little red strap circled his wrist while he knelt in the dirt and made our shelter hold. I watched the light move over his hands. His fingers were cold. He pressed the stake in deeper, checked the angle, pulled the guy line tight. He was not performing. Nobody had asked him. He fixed it because it needed fixing. For 1 second, there was a small opening in me. Not guilt. Something more dangerous because it was plain. My husband was not trying to ruin my joy. He was still building places for me to be safe after I had made him look small in front of people who mattered. The opening stayed for one breath. Then I closed it. I told myself that being useful was the only language he wanted to speak. I told myself he chose the tent stake because tools were easier than me. I told myself that if he looked sad, it was because he had lost control of the scene, not because I had hurt him. So I laughed when Caleb came back from the cooler and asked if I was accepting applications for a more relaxed camping supervisor. I said the position had strong candidates. Nobody laughed that time except Lena, and even she stopped fast. Later, by the lakeside picnic area, Tessa came over with a stack of paper plates. She asked if I knew how that sounded. Her tone was low, almost careful. She said Ethan had spent the whole week making sure this trip would be easy for me after my event season. I told her I did not need a sister-in-law review of my marriage. Tessa's face changed. Not anger. Storage. She was putting that sentence somewhere she could reach again. The conversation produced its consequence at once. Tessa took the plates to Priya instead of handing them to me. Priya did not look over. Lena stood beside me, but she turned her body half away toward the lake. I need to be fair. I saw those movements. I just did not honor them. As evening fell, Rowan asked everyone to raise their mugs for the video he was making. It should have been harmless. A weekend clip. A small memory. Caleb stood to my left. Ethan was still near the tent, brushing dirt from his knee. When Rowan lifted the phone, I raised my orange mug toward Caleb and said he was the only reason this trip had rhythm. The fire made the mug glow at the rim. Ethan looked up. His face did not crack. That was the worst part. If he had looked furious, I would have known where to put my own shame. But his face simply settled. Something in him stopped asking for rescue. After the toast, he did not return to the fire. He checked the cooler latch, folded a tarp edge under a bin, and moved his sleeping bag closer to the tent door. Caleb came near me and asked if Ethan was mad. His voice was soft enough to sound concerned and flat enough to protect himself. I said my husband was always mad when he could not control the weather. Caleb smiled with only half his mouth. Agenda B was there already, though I did not have that language. He liked the spark but not the smoke on his own clothes. The group heat stayed visible. Priya's shoulders were tight. Tessa sat beside Ethan's empty chair. Rowan posted the camping story and tagged all of us. The tagged photo showed me in Caleb's jacket, my mug lifted toward him, my husband in the background with the red headlamp on his wrist. Of course I reposted it. When Ethan finished fixing the tent, he did not come back to the fire. The path to the campground showers was made of flat stones with mud pushing up between them. After the fire, the air turned colder, and every sound seemed closer than it was. Zipper teeth, lake insects, someone coughing inside a tent. I walked that path with my towel under one arm and Caleb's jacket still over my shoulders. I need to be fair. By then, I knew people had seen enough to make a story. 3 things were true. Tessa was angry. Priya was quiet in the way people get quiet before they leave you alone with your choices. And my husband was moving through the campsite like a man who had stopped trying to be invited back into his own marriage. Tessa found me near the water pump. Her hair was tied badly, and she held 2 toothbrushes in one hand. She said Ethan was not trying to own me. She said he was trying not to be embarrassed beside his own wife. That was calm, specific, almost kind. I heard family interference. I told her she had always thought Ethan deserved a simpler woman. She blinked once and said that was not what she said. I told her it was what she meant. The consequence was small but sharp. She stopped explaining. She walked past me and put 1 toothbrush on Ethan's cooler, not ours. Not the shared one. His. When I returned to the tent area, Ethan was sitting outside under the tarp. The fire had gone down to orange lines. His shoulders were rounded forward. My damp sweater hung over my arm because I had dropped it near the shower bench and picked it up wet at the cuffs. He reached for it without asking. I almost pulled it back, but there were people nearby, and I still cared about the shape of things. So I let him take it. He shook it once, carefully, then folded it over the back of a camping chair so the wet sleeves would hang free. He did not look at me while he did it. That was the trigger. Not a speech. Not an accusation. My husband folding my damp sweater on a cold night after I had made him a joke. The moment slowed down in the ugliest way. His hands knew the sweater. They knew not to stretch the cuffs. They knew I hated the shoulders creased. He was still doing the small work of loving me while pulling his face away from mine. The silence between us was not punishment. It was a tired body setting down a weight it had carried too long. For a breath, I almost saw him. Not the husband who missed the opening. Not the man who asked careful questions too late. The person outside our tent, folding something of mine because he had not yet learned how to stop. I could have said his name then. I could have asked him to sit with me. I could have put Caleb's jacket on the chair and let it fall between us like evidence. Instead, I closed the door. I told myself his silence was another performance of moral superiority. I told myself he wanted me to feel dirty for needing warmth. Then I took out my phone and texted Caleb to ask if he was awake. Ethan saw the screen light up. He did not ask who it was. That made me angrier than a question would have. He said I had been making him ask permission to be hurt. He said it was not one joke, not one jacket, not one message. He said it was the way I kept creating rooms where he had to either swallow humiliation or look controlling. That was his pattern sentence. The accumulation, not one incident. My husband had found the right words, but he found them when I no longer wanted to reward him for having them. I told him I had spent months being lonely beside a man who could plan every bolt and battery but could not stand beside me when my work mattered. I said he made marriage feel like a checklist with a shared bed at the end. He took that in. He did not deny it. That should have mattered. Instead, I used his silence as permission to continue. I said I was tired of begging for warmth from someone who treated emotion like a weather delay. He asked if Caleb was warmth or just an audience. His voice did not rise. The question landed too close, so I moved around it. I told him not to make this about another man because that was easier than admitting he had left first. The talk ended because Ethan stood up. That was the consequence. Not a door slam, not a threat. He picked up the red headlamp from the hook inside our tent and put it into his own duffel. The shared camping box stayed open between us. Batteries, matches, bug spray, folded trash bags. The headlamp had always gone in that box. I watched him zip the side pocket closed. Of course I told myself he was being dramatic. Later I sent Lena a message saying Tessa had cornered me by the pump. Lena took 11 minutes to answer, though she was usually fast when the story had teeth. She said only that Tessa sounded protective. No flame emoji, no sharp joke, just that. I stared at the message and typed 3 answers, then deleted all of them. I told myself she was tired. Caleb answered faster. He said he was sorry the night had turned heavy. He also said he did not want to be the reason Ethan and I fought. That should have shown me his real flaw. Caleb liked being wanted, but he did not like being named in the cost. I told him he was not the reason. I said the reason was years old. He sent back that he trusted me to know my own marriage. That sentence was a clean mirror, and I mistook it for support. Near midnight, Priya walked past our tent and saw me standing outside with Caleb's jacket still on. She asked if I needed anything. I said I needed people to stop treating me like a crime scene. She nodded once. The next morning she would not answer my private message, but that night she only said the bathrooms were free. Inside the tent, Ethan laid his sleeping bag flat on his side. He moved with the neat care of a person doing a task he wanted completed before his body gave out. I tried a softer voice then. That was my micro-shift. Controlled partial truth. I said maybe we had both been careless. I said maybe camping was a bad place to talk. I said we could reset in the morning. He asked what reset meant, if I still planned to keep Caleb close enough to make a point. I said he was twisting my words. He said he was finally listening to them. That failed compromise made the wall higher. My husband turned off the lantern and left the red headlamp in his duffel. The dark inside the tent had shape. I lay there with my phone under my palm, waiting for Caleb to write again, while Ethan's breathing stayed even on the other side. The zipper on his duffel had sounded too neat because it was not a mood. It was a decision. After midnight, the campsite changed into a place made of small sounds. Rain tapped once and stopped. A cooler lid closed somewhere near Rowan's tent. The lake slapped the shore in slow, flat beats. Inside our tent, my husband lay on his side facing away from me, and the space between our sleeping bags felt like a path nobody wanted to cross. I need to be fair. I did not stumble into the line I crossed. I walked to it. 3 things were true. I wanted Ethan to choose me loudly. His best friend still answered when I reached for him. And I had started to believe that making a scene was the same thing as telling the truth. My phone lit against my palm. Caleb had sent a message saying he was still awake and sitting outside his tent. He said he hated how tense the group felt. He said he did not want me alone with all of it. That was Caleb's way. Soft words. No clear offer. No clear refusal. A hand extended from a safe distance. I sat up. The sleeping bag made a dry whisper sound. Ethan turned onto his back but did not speak. I told him Caleb and I had talked before the trip about how complicated things felt. I said the arrangement was not new. I said everyone kept acting like I had invented something in the dark when really people had known there was tension. That was not fully true. It was shaped from pieces. A message here, a joke there. A complaint Lena had fed back to me with better lighting. Ethan asked what arrangement meant. His voice was calm enough to frighten me, though I would not call it fear then. I called it control. I called it his engineer voice. I called it anything except the sound of my husband standing at the last door. I said Caleb could stay in the tent for a while and talk to me because I could not breathe with Ethan acting like a silent judge beside me. Ethan sat up. The tent was dark except for the thin grey shine from the moon through the nylon wall. He asked if I was asking my husband to leave our tent so his best friend could come in. The sentence should have stopped me. Instead, it gave me a shape to fight. I told him not to make it ugly. I said he had agreed for months that our marriage was not simple anymore. I said he could not spend a whole year absent and then act wounded when I found someone who could look at me. He said he had failed me. He said that plainly. Then he said he was still there and could drive us home right now if I chose the marriage over the performance. That was his final clean offer. Not repeated, not begged. One open door. I heard ownership. I heard him saying I had to be smaller to be loved. My wound did the translating before his words reached me. My mother's old kitchen voice rose in my head, the one that said, "Men leave women who become background." I saw my mother at the table after my father left, smoking with the window closed, telling me never to become a woman a man simply keeps. So I reached for the one sentence that was true. I told my husband he had made our marriage feel like a project plan where every task mattered except my loneliness. He did not answer. He could not refute it because it was accurate. The missed opening, the careful apology, the socks, the batteries, the bridge reports, the way he thought doing things near me was the same as standing with me. That part was real. Then I used the real part to excuse the rest. I told him to take his sleeping bag outside if he needed space so badly. I said Caleb could sit with me until I calmed down. I said it as if calm was the goal and not victory. Ethan reached for his pillow. That movement took longer than I expected. He did not yank it. He slid it free from under his head and pressed the flattened middle once with his hand, like some part of him still wanted the object to be orderly. The zipper opened. Cold air came in. Tessa was awake outside. I saw her shadow turn from the tarp line. She saw her brother step out of his own tent with his pillow under one arm and his sleeping bag under the other. She did not speak. That was worse than if she had called me cruel. Her silence was another record. Ethan stood under the tarp and asked Caleb, who had come halfway across the dirt path, if this was what he wanted. Caleb stopped. His face was pale in the low campsite light. He said he did not want to hurt anyone. Of course he said that. His best friend had a gift for being present in the wound and absent in the blame. I told Caleb to come inside if he was coming. My voice was sharper than I meant it to be. Priya's tent flap moved across the path. Rowan's lantern turned on for a second, then off. At least one witness had become several. Caleb entered the tent slowly. He kept his shoes near the flap, pointed outward. Even then, he was preparing to leave. Nothing explicit happened. That almost makes it worse to explain. The betrayal was not in details anyone could describe. It was in the staging. My husband outside under a tarp. His best friend inside the tent. Me lying there as if the shape of the scene could prove I was still chosen. Caleb sat beside the door for a while and whispered that maybe this had gone too far. I told him Ethan had agreed by not stopping it earlier. Caleb said agreeing and accepting were not the same. I heard cowardice. He meant self-protection. I told him not to retreat now that things were honest. The word honest did a lot of work for me that night. I reached for Lena next. I sent her a message saying Ethan had finally shown everyone how cold he could be. The read receipt turned grey under my thumb, and no answer came. That was all. One grey read receipt with no answer. I need to be fair. The absence hit harder than Tessa's stare. Lena had always put glitter around my worst impulses. Without her, the scene looked plainer. So I put the phone face down. Outside, Ethan moved his sleeping bag under the tarp. The ground was damp, and I heard him shake the fabric twice before laying it down. Tessa asked him something too quiet for me to hear. He answered in a voice that did not travel. Caleb checked his phone. Then he turned it face down too. I asked who he was texting. He said no one important. That was a lie. Or maybe just a door closing early. He asked again if Ethan was really okay with this. I said my husband agreed because that was the only version that let me remain the woman I had decided to be. For a while, nobody moved. The whole campsite seemed to hold its breath without making a sound. That was the strangest part. After all my work to control the room, the silence belonged to Ethan. He did not threaten. He did not shout. He did not knock on the tent and demand anything back. He simply stayed outside. By morning, the rain had made tiny beads on the tent wall, and Caleb was already awake. He said he should go check on the firewood. He left before I could ask him to stay seated beside me. His sleeping pad had not even warmed the ground. Outside, my husband folded his sleeping bag with exact corners. The red headlamp was clipped to the side of his duffel. He did not look toward the tent when I opened the flap. Nobody asked him to come back. The campground office porch had 2 wooden steps and a damp mat that said welcome in faded letters. Morning smoke sat low between the trees. My husband asked me to meet him there after breakfast, and I went because I still thought there was a version of the story I could manage. I need to be fair. 3 things were true when I reached the porch. Tessa stood beside him with her arms folded. Noah Bell, the campground manager, stayed near the office door with a clipboard. And my husband looked less angry than rested, which was worse. A man in a navy jacket asked my name. I gave it. He handed me an envelope and told me it was for Marta Koval. My fingers left a wet mark on the paper because I had been holding my orange enamel mug too tightly. Inside was a petition for dissolution of marriage and a motion for temporary orders, for exclusive use of the marital apartment and preservation of joint accounts. The first temporary orders hearing was listed for June 18th at County Family Court. I signed where the man pointed. Then I stood on the porch step, holding the envelope, while the mug cooled in my other hand. My husband said the tagged campground story, Rowan's video, the group chat, and Tessa seeing him leave the tent were enough. He said nothing extra had been needed. I told Noah this was a private marriage issue. He looked at the steps, not at my face, and said the porch had to stay clear for registered guests. That was the neutral truth. Not cruel, not kind. I moved. Caleb had already left. Later, I learned he sent my husband one careful message, saying he was sorry for his part, then drove out before breakfast without saying goodbye to me. I stayed in Lena's spare room for 9 nights, then rented a studio over a laundromat with pipes that knocked at midnight. The joint account was restricted until the hearing, and my personal savings became deposits, groceries, and quiet math. Priya left the group chat, Rowan stopped sending weekend invites, and Tessa blocked my number after one practical message about keys. Caleb told mutual friends he had misunderstood the arrangement and needed space from both of us. My venue director heard the campsite story from a vendor and removed me from client-facing retreats for the summer. I need to be fair. I wanted proof that I could still be chosen. 3 things were true, even then. My husband had failed me in ways people could not see. His best friend gave me attention that looked like rescue. And I turned one true loneliness into a public scene nobody could survive. The red headlamp stayed clipped to Ethan's duffel. By the time the fire died, my marriage had learned to leave without making noise.